Hello, good day, and welcome to where you are listening to us today.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à cette conférence de presse. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes le mardi 6 avril 2021. Je m'appelle Christiane et je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette conférence de presse du jour sur la Covid-19. Nous anticipons la Journée mondiale de la santé qui est prévue demain le 7 avril. Nous avons une liste d'invités spéciaux aujourd'hui. Je commencerai par son Excellence Madame la Première ministre Mia Amor-Motley de la Barbade, son Excellence le Président Carlos Andrés Alvarado Quesada du Costa Rica, son Excellence le Président Hage Geingob de Namibie et son Excellence le Président Ilham Aliyev d'Azerbaïdjan, qui nous rejoindra par le biais d'une déclaration vidéo. Vous avez accès à des services d'interprétation dans les 6 langues officielles de l'ONU, arabe, chinois, français, anglais, espagnol et russe, plus le portugais et l'hindi. Je vais maintenant présenter les participants présents dans la salle. Le docteur Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, directeur général de l'OMS, Dr Mike Ryan, directeur exécutif des programmes d'urgence sanitaire de l'OMS, Dr Maria Van Kerkhoff, responsable de la réponse à la Covid-19, Dr Mariangela Simao, responsable des produits sanitaires, Dr Bruce Aylward, conseiller spécial du directeur général et responsable de l'accélérateur ACT, et Dr Ruggerio Gaspar, directeur de la réglementation et de la préqualification. Je donne tout de suite la parole au directeur général pour qu'il nous fasse part de ses remarques liminaires. Bonjour, bonsoir à tous. Demain, nous célébrons la Journée mondiale de la santé.
COVID-19 has exacerbated inequalities both between and within countries. While we have all undoubtedly been impacted by the pandemic, the poorest and most marginalized have been hit hardest, both in terms of lives and livelihoods lost. In the year ahead, the world needs to make 5 vital changes. First, we need to invest in equitable production and access to COVID-19 rapid tests, oxygen treatments, and vaccines between and within countries. At the start of the year, I made a call for every country to start vaccinating health workers and older people in the first 100 days of 2021. This week will mark the 100th day, and 190 countries and economies have now started vaccination. COVAX itself has already delivered 36 million doses to 86 countries and economies. Supply chains are up and running and health systems primed. Scaling up production and equitable distribution remains the major barrier to ending the acute stage of this pandemic. It is a travesty that in some countries, health workers and those at-risk groups remain completely unvaccinated. The effort to achieve vaccine equity will not stop this week. WHO will continue to call on governments to share vaccine doses and fill the $22.1 billion gap in the ACT Accelerator for the equitable distribution of vaccines, rapid tests, and therapeutics. We will also look to find new ways to work with manufacturers to boost overall vaccine production. This month, individuals around the world will also be able to get involved in accelerating vaccine equity via a new fundraising campaign. Developed by the WHO Foundation and a range of partners, the campaign will enable individuals and companies to get one, give one, and close the overall COVID-19 vaccine gap. Further updates will be shared around the launch. Second, there must be a serious investment in primary health care and getting health services to every member of every community. The pandemic has exposed the fragility of our health systems. as essential services were paused, many diseases came roaring back. At least half of the world's population still lacks access to essential health services, and out-of-pocket expenses on health drive almost 100 million people into poverty each year. As countries move forward post-COVID-19, it will be vital to avoid cuts in public spending on health and other social sectors. Such cuts are likely to increase hardship among already disadvantaged groups. They will weaken health system performance, increase health risks, add to fiscal pressure in the future, and undermine development gains. Instead, governments should meet WHO's recommended target of spending an additional 1% of GDP on primary health care, which is central to improving both equity and efficiency. And they must reduce the global shortfall of 18 million health workers needed to achieve universal health coverage by 2030. Third, prioritize health and social protection. Some countries have already put in place expanded social protection schemes to mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic on poverty, education, nutrition, and overall health. These schemes should be extended until essential services are up and running again. And they must include marginalized groups in planning and implementing future schemes. Fourth, build safe, healthy, and inclusive neighborhoods. City leaders have often been powerful champions for better health, for example, by improving transport systems and water and sanitation facilities. Access to healthy housing in safe neighborhoods is key to achieving health for all. But too often, the lack of basic social services for some communities traps them in a spiral of sickness and insecurity. That must change. Meanwhile, 80% of the world's populations living in extreme poverty are in rural areas where 7 out of 10 people lack access to basic sanitation and water services. So countries must intensify efforts to reach rural communities with health and other basic social services. Finally, data and health information systems must be enhanced. High quality and timely disaggregated data by sex, wealth, education, ethnicity, race, gender, and place of residence is key to working out where inequities exist and addressing them. Health inequality monitoring has to be an integral part of all national and health information systems. At present, just half the world's countries have any capacity to do this. Today, I'm happy to welcome 4 heads of state and government to talk about health equity and changes they have made to achieve it. First, Her Excellency, Prime Minister Maya Motley of Barbados will start proceedings, and I'm keen to hear of Barbados' experience in the last year and the way ahead. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Prime Minister, we don't hear your sound, please.
Thank you very much, my brother, Dr. Tedros. Your Excellency Hage Geingob, President of Namibia, who I have not seen since Nairobi in December 2019. We didn't expect the last year. And to my other brother, Your Excellency Carlos Alvarado Quesada, we spoke a couple months ago, and equally we didn't expect that this journey would be as long as it is. President also, Aliyev, I want to say how pleasant it is this morning for me to join you, because 73 years ago, tomorrow, the World Health Organization would have been formed, and therefore the commemoration of this day through World Health Day is most appropriate. It would have been appropriate in any scenario, but more relevant and more critical at this point. In the Caribbean, we love our proverbs, short, clever phrases packed with the knowledge to last a lifetime. And I suspect those in Africa are the people from whom we've gotten that love of proverbs. One favorite amongst us, and especially our school teachers in the region, was the one that simply said, Peter pays for Paul and Paul pays for all. And I start here this morning because it is in the recognition that this is a collective battle that we will win the victory. We have come together globally to try and fight a pandemic, but we have to ask ourselves whether we did it in sufficient time and on sufficient scale. We have to ask ourselves whether the 5 priority actions being focused on this morning, equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, tests, and treatments, both within and between countries, is being achieved by the countries of the region and the countries of the world. In the Caribbean, our journey has been torturous over the last year. And Dr. Tedros, I know that you have tried to intervene on numerous occasions to assist us. But the bald reality is that our market size in many instances is simply too small to command the attention of global pharmaceutical companies or indeed of other suppliers of goods in the normal supply chain that will lead for therapeutics distribution, vaccine distribution. And the bottom line is that we have also separately been regarded by the global community as countries that have come out of the depths of poverty and therefore are not deserving of assistance in the traditional ways normally reserved for the most vulnerable. This has made life difficult. We've held on to the promise of COVAX, and I've come to you this morning having received the first tranche of Barbados's vaccines, 3% of our population, with respect to the COVID vaccines this morning. But for many globally, this has been a difficult exercise because as we've seen the spikes can literally grow, we've not had access even when we are prepared to pay. It is against this background, therefore, that the first call to action of equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, tests, and treatments within and between countries is one with which we can relate. Secondly, the post-COVID-19 recovery budget and plans to protect and prioritize health and social sectors is one that is truly being felt by the majority of us. And why? The World Bank estimates that global GDP will fall by about 4% this year, with between 40 and 60 million people entering extreme poverty. But our reality also is, as a tourism and travel dependent country, the fall in our GDP last year was not 4%, was not 8%, was not even 12 or 16%. It was 18%, threatening to take our country back more than a decade as a result of the loss of production and productive capacity. Regrettably, we continue to be treated globally as one of those countries that is not deserving to concessional capital, even as we face the most difficult crisis that we have faced in a century. These are issues that I hope that the Development Committee of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that meets later this week, and I have the honor of chairing, will begin to start to put our case for the need to use different criteria for determining how countries should access serious concessional capital most needed now in order to stave off the worst aspects of this pandemic, but more importantly, to deal with the long-lasting consequences of the pandemic, which is the social and economic losses that have been sustained in the last decade. The third aspect of the call to action, equitable services and infrastructure in all communities, both urban and rural. This is absolutely critical, particularly for the larger countries in the region and globally. But even within a small country such as ours, we have recognized that there are differences and that part of the problem, particularly in the urban setting, is the density of housing that has existed in many instances pre-independence and post-independence, largely because most developing countries in the world have had a significantly broad agenda, reflected by many in the SDG agenda, but a significant broad development agenda that makes it difficult for us to have corrected all of the wrongs that we've needed to correct since independence. It means that in urban communities, the density and the exposure is far greater, regrettably, than in most, but equally in rural communities, the lack of access to available health care for larger countries, not so much small island developing states, but larger countries remains a major issue. Fourthly, the call to action looks at the issue of primary health care for everyone, everywhere. Well, I like to make the point that the Caribbean, more than most, has in the post-independence region era determined that for us to leave anyone behind is a travesty because our modern settlement was based on discrimination and exclusion. And therefore, the reality and the imperative of inclusion as well as transparency are absolutely vital if we are to bring our people out of these difficult times in which we live. Finally, better data collection and reporting in countries so that we know where the health inequalities are and can address them. My friends, this will not be the last pandemic. There will not be the last one for us. History is replete with examples, and we have to determine what we will learn from our experience over the course of the last year. For many, the 1918-1920 Spanish flu pandemic is too far in the recesses of our recent memory, such that we made fundamental mistakes that we should never allow anyone to make again. Dr. Tedros, you asked me to serve as the co-chair on the One Health Global Initiative, which we have dubbed the slow motion pandemic, because we fear that by 2050, more people will die from these superviruses that are antibiotics that we have and other medication are not allowing us to treat sufficiently. I pray that we will take in front, as we would say before, in front takes us. And what do I mean by that? That we will so sensitize the global population that the basic things that we need to take action, the basic policy instruments necessary to remove people from poverty or necessary to remove the juxtaposition of animal and humans in living conditions, not just working conditions, that have given rise to so many diseases that have caused so much death and so much concern in the world. If we do not get the fundamental development equation correct, if we do not work together, if we do not appreciate that we can only work together if we are to achieve a fairer and healthier world, then we run the risk of seeing millions of persons die again in circumstances where different policy responses or similar policy responses with different scale and different pace of execution can hopefully have a different result in ensuring that less and less people will become victims to awful epidemics and pandemics. They say politics is the art of repetition, and I said so this morning. Over the course of the last year, we have said the same thing more often than at any other time. There is no magic bullet, and there is no magic recipe. The answer is simply for us to work together to get that fairer world, and for there to be a level of global moral leadership, recognizing that the singular pursuit of individual countries will not rid the world of the major problems, because human beings cannot be contained behind boundaries easily in this globally interdependent world. I pray that we will, across the world, summon the courage to be able to have coordinated action, not just acting together, but coordinated action, such that we are in a position to be able to see the end of this pandemic, because we are acting collectively with shutdowns, we're acting collectively with protocols, we're acting collectively with the kinds of policy responses that we now know after a year are critical if we are to put this behind us. I thank the World Health Organization and all of its staff members, the Pan American Health Organization that serves us in this hemisphere, and all of its staff members for continuing to keep the battle on. But I recognize that the ball lies in the courts of the political will of member states of the global community. Thank you, and may we rise to that point where we summon the courage for that globally coordinated action to make a fairer, healthier world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Prime Minister Motley. Moral leadership and coordinated action. I fully agree. Barbados' experience suppressing COVID-19, as well as investing in universal health coverage, is an example for the region and the world. So thank you so much again. I will now turn to His Excellency President Carlos Alvarado of Costa Rica, who has been working closely with WHO on how to ensure that new health technologies are available in all countries through his idea, the setup, which we have started implementing together. So, President Alvarado, very nice to see you again, even if it's online, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros. Muchas gracias, Dr. Tedros. También un saludo a su excelencia, la primera ministra Mia Mottley de Barbados, al presidente Hage Geingob de Namibia y a las personas que nos acompañan en esta conferencia de prensa. En efecto, doctor Tedros, los principios del CITAP, que es el repositorio de tecnologías para la salud, siguen vigentes hoy, casi un año después del inicio de esta pandemia y un día antes de la conmemoración del Día Mundial de la Salud. Y eso tiene que ver con el acceso a las tecnologías o tratamientos de forma equitativa para todas las personas en todo el mundo sin ninguna distinción. Como lo decía la primera ministra Mottley, eso tiene que ver mucho con liderazgo moral y con compromiso para avanzar en esta dirección. Este repositorio puede acopiar tecnologías que estén a disposición de todos los países y todos los gobiernos en todo el mundo y tenemos que seguir empujando. Como lo dijo el doctor Tedros, ya hay un equipo establecido en la OMS para este fin y ahora lo que necesitamos son los gobiernos y el sector privado comprometernos a que esto sea una realidad. Sobre el primer punto que plantea el llamado del doctor Tedros sobre el acceso equitativo, quisiera mencionar dos temas centrales. Uno tiene que ver con el fortalecimiento de la seguridad social y la salud universal en los países. En el caso de Costa Rica, ha sido la fortaleza de la seguridad social universal la que nos ha protegido y ha hecho que se minimicen las diferencias entre las personas de más ingresos y menos ingresos, porque hemos procurado que cualquier persona en cualquier rincón del país tenga el mismo acceso a pruebas, vacunas, tratamiento e incluso a hospitalización, sin distingo geográfico, económico alguno. Esto es difícil y es caro, pero eso hace la diferencia en un mundo que tiene que tener mayor igualdad. Y la pandemia, como lo dijo el doctor Tedros, ha incrementado las desigualdades entre países y dentro de los países. Y las desigualdades también tienen efectos en la salud. Las sociedades más desiguales son también las sociedades más violentas. Y las sociedades más violentas también generan otros fenómenos como migraciones o como obviamente pérdidas humanas. Otro punto muy importante en relación a los accesos equitativos tiene que ver con el impulso que varios países estamos haciendo para el Tratado Internacional para la Preparación y Respuesta ante Pandemias. Previo a la pandemia del COVID-19, el mundo globalizado no había experimentado con tal impacto el efecto de una pandemia. Y tenemos que aprender de esta experiencia y tenemos que estar listos. Y sobre todo estar listos significa estar listos para una acción coordinada y una acción solidaria que no distinga entre más desarrollo, menos desarrollo, más riqueza, menos riqueza, lo urbano, lo rural. Esperamos que pues este tratado logre concretar estos principios, pero a la vez procuraremos que este tratado también incluya principios como los que hemos impulsado en el CITAP, en el repositorio. Sobre los presupuestos para la recuperación post-COVID, ha quedado claro que la salud no es solo una materia de enfermedad, La salud es un tema integral y no podremos procurar el bienestar de nuestras poblaciones si no tenemos garantías para presupuestos que den soporte al sector salud, al sector comunal, al sector de infraestructura. De ahí que es tan importante que los organismos multilaterales puedan otorgar vías de financiamiento para los países pobres, para los países emergentes, para hacer frente a los efectos de largo y mediano plazo de la pandemia. Hoy las economías desarrolladas han logrado tener paquetes especiales para sus países para enfrentar los efectos del COVID, pero no es algo que los países emergentes o en pobreza puedan hacer porque no hay esos márgenes fiscales. Igual que no habrá una recuperación global del COVID-19 mientras no todo el planeta esté vacunado, no habrá una recuperación económica del planeta mientras todo el planeta esté vacunado económicamente. De ahí es tan importante el tema del financiamiento, sea de prórrogas de deuda o sea de financiamiento a largo plazo con tasas cero o tasas estables de interés para que los países puedan tener margen de maniobra y financiar el desarrollo, la salud pública, la infraestructura y la recuperación. Y a pesar de parecer un tema financiero, es un tema de salud también. Por eso me parece tan importante que lo estemos abordando. Costa Rica ha lanzado la iniciativa FACE, Fund to Alleviate COVID Economics, en el marco de Naciones Unidas y también en la presidencia de la CEPAL, como una propuesta para lograr esos fondos concesionales para apoyar las economías emergentes. Y mencionar un caso específico en el que también las opiniones de las agencias calificadoras de riesgo, creo y creemos muchos, no están considerando los esfuerzos que los gobiernos estamos haciendo para mantener economías estables, pero a la vez para atender a nuestras poblaciones. Y cada vez que hay una calificación en esto que es negativa, hace más caro el financiamiento de nuestros países. Tenemos que hacer endógena la variable COVID a la hora de evaluar a los países en sus esfuerzos económicos por atender los efectos de la pandemia. En materia de recolección de datos y evaluación de datos, otro de los puntos planteados por el secretario general, Costa Rica tiene un sistema desarrollado que es el expediente digital, es el EDUS, donde cada ciudadano tiene su expediente digital y eso nos permite tener información muy valiosa del progreso, obviamente manejando toda la confidencialidad de cada una de las personas. Pero sí es importante que tengamos un manejo de esa información para esta pandemia y para mejor atención de futuras pandemias. Finalmente, agradecer todo el trabajo que ha hecho la Organización Mundial de la Salud durante esta pandemia. Al doctor Tedros agradecerle y expresar públicamente el apoyo de Costa Rica, el apoyo mío a la labor que está realizando y también a los esfuerzos para que los tratamientos, diagnósticos y vacunas lleguen de manera equitativa y pronta a todos los rincones del planeta de manera igualitaria. Un placer poder saludar al amigo el doctor Tedros. Buenos días desde Costa Rica.
Muchas gracias, Your Excellency President Alvarado. I wholeheartedly agree. Equitably sharing of rapid tests, therapeutics, oxygen, and vaccines are key to ending the acute phase of the pandemic. That means tech transfer, sharing know-how, and waiving intellectual property rights. Thank you so much for your leadership on this, especially on CTAP. I look forward to now hearing from His Excellency, President Hage Geingob of Namibia, on the role of society efforts to tackle COVID-19 and lessons going forward on health equity. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, leaders, So you'll ask in, as usual, great to listen to you, Your Excellencies. A great pleasure for me in this important event, World Health Day. Given the devastating pandemic of the world, it is timely, the unity of the nations, considering this, and indeed the ways and means a fairer, healthier world post COVID-19. The fact that the Director General WHO has invited us to be part of this year's event speaks to the urgency of fostering recovery for the entire world from the economic devastation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Building a fairer and healthier world will demand joint and concerted action. It will require that we, as members of the human family, stand resolutely together to do everything that is required to return our societies to normalcy. Our people, young and old, have been traumatized. Lives and livelihoods have been disrupted. We are a country that has been deeply scarred. Colonialism and racial oppression, and healthier society. This is an objective that our national liberation struggle. We have pursued since the dawn of independence. Our constitution, various pieces of legislation, updated by our lawmaking policies, have been aimed at building an equitable in which no one must feel left out. We in Namibia, we applied equally now didn't get it. We got help from our good friends, China and India, who gave us vaccines so far. We put the advance, we had the advance payment at this, but there is this exclusion. The COVID apartheid is now prevailing. That we already made our deposit. Wait to get our. That's why I always say inclusive.
Your Excellency, please allow me to come in. The sound is interrupting quite a lot. Is there a chance that you're on the technical side, there can be done something? It seems to be an interruption from your sound signal from your end. Apologies. Maybe we can try again, and if possible, then have your talking points and your elaborations that we can at the end share in writing also. Please continue, sir, Your Excellency.
What I was trying to say is to address to your number one point, equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines, tests and treatment within and between countries. We did apply and paid our deposit to the COVID vaccine. But there is a vaccine apartheid, I'm saying, that we, a small country, have paid deposit, but up to now, we didn't get any vaccine. What we got are vaccines donated by our friends, China and India, and I really thank them for that. Exclusivity, as it spells, conflict. Inclusivity spells harmony. And we are left out now to get that I call apartheid. and we fought against apartheid for many. After pieces were divided, after adopted our policy of red. Am I audible or what is going on? Because we believe that when wounds of the past are healed, this had laid the foundation of our country into a. Every tragedy brings new insights. This is true.
Your Excellency, when you restarted, it was okay, and then started to break up. So I think there is a problem in the audio system. The video is okay, but the audio system is breaking up. So we have heard up to the vaccines you got from India and China. Later, I think there was some breakup again.
Then I was talking about vaccine apartheid. I want to make that very clear.
Yes.
As a man who suffered, and we are here, we deposited, but we didn't get any vaccine. Can I talk?
Yeah, still breaking up, but can you go on? Let's see.
Okay. Every tragedy brings new insights. This is true for the COVID-19 pandemic. At its speed, velocity, the pandemic compelled humanity to act in unison to overcome a common enemy. The public health measures adopted most, if not all, countries around the world demonstrated that the international community did consensus to address a common challenge. It demonstrated that the world we are able to stand together. One voice. This, I believe, should be a springboard for the concerted action and common purpose to address other equally important challenges facing humanity today. The manner in which Nigeria responded to the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrates that the old adage that says, where there is a will, there is a way. As world leaders, the necessary political will to address the devastation brought by economy. Our national response meant that we were able to in various aspects, such as expanding physical, bringing on board professionals, preparing medical equipment, supplies, improving our evaluation system. It meant that we were the provision of hygiene services, simultaneously address and spread associated with hygiene. A fairer and healthier world also means that our global approach necessarily address the root causes, both unfairness and poor health in all their manifestations. The social determinants of health must therefore receive our full attention. In this regard, we must speak not only of availability of opportunities and health services, but of equitable access to essential tools such as COVID-19 vaccines, as I already said. There is no other alternative but collaborating our fight in the pandemic, and by so doing to get a fairer and healthier world. Since I'm being sabotaged, I'll end here and participate further.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Where there is a will, there is a way. I fully agree, and it's great that Namibia is rolling out vaccines, and I was informed also that through the COVAX facilities, you will have your share in 2 weeks. But I fully agree with the problems we're facing with vaccine equity. And as you know, we said vaccine nationalism or vaccine apartheid, as you said it. It's actually the problem with regard to the pandemic response now. Because unless everyone is safe, no one will be safe. So it's in every nation's interest or in every country's interest to make sure that there is vaccine equity. So I fully agree with you. I now welcome His Excellency President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan to reflect on his experience of the pandemic and what's critical to end the acute phase as quickly as possible. He couldn't join us in person, so he sent us a video, and please.
Every year since 1950, we celebrate a World Health Day on April 7th. But 2021 is a year when the importance of health became even more significant. Having a modern, sustainable, high-quality healthcare system is a priority for every country. Healthcare in Azerbaijan is currently going through a significant change. With implementation of mandatory health insurance, Azerbaijan is strengthening the primary health care, renovating the emergency medical care services, facilitating the digitalization by starting e-health platform and national health accounts within the country. In the meantime, the second year of COVID-19 pandemic is continuing to put enormous pressure on healthcare system around the world. Azerbaijan was among the first countries to mobilize global efforts against COVID-19 pandemic. We initiated the summit of the Turkish Council in April 2020, the summit of the non-aligned movement in May 2020, and the special session of the United Nations General Assembly at the level of the heads of state and government in December 2020. Honoring its international responsibility, Azerbaijan has made voluntary contributions to the World Health Organization in the amount of $10 million. We have also provided direct humanitarian and financial assistance to more than 30 countries in their fight with the coronavirus. This year, World Health Day is dedicated to building a fairer and healthier world, and the question of equal and fair distribution of vaccines is of paramount importance for this cause. Yet, we all are deeply concerned by the unequal and unfair distribution of vaccines among developing and developed countries. Some countries hoard several times more vaccines compared to their actual needs. It is clear that in such circumstances, other countries will face vaccine shortage. Supporting fairness in vaccine distribution, Azerbaijan put forward a draft resolution ensuring equitable, affordable, timely, and universal access for all countries to vaccines in response to the coronavirus disease pandemic at the UN Human Rights Council. The resolution was adopted by consensus on March 23rd this year. Azerbaijan was also among the first countries to join and support COVAX initiative. We and the whole international community expect this initiative to become a model of cooperation and solidarity in response to pandemic. Only together we will overcome the pandemic and will return to normal life. Happy World Health Day.
Thank you, President Aliyev, and I welcome your leadership on calling for equitable, affordable, timely, and universal access to vaccines at the UN Human Rights Council, and agree we must do more to ensure vaccines are fairly distributed. Again, thank you so much to all heads of states and government for joining us today. We have a lot to do to achieve health equity, but I'm proud to see heads of states leading from the front, which will be key to us strengthening health systems overall and preparing for future pandemics. I thank you. So if you have few minutes more, if you can join us with the Q&A with the media, we would appreciate it. If not, we fully understand. Thank you so much again. Christian, back to you.
Thank you very much, Director General. Now let me now open the floor to questions from the media. We have a long list already, but in case you want to get into the queue, please press the raise your hand icon on your screen. First is John Miller from Reuters. John, please unmute yourself. John,
thanks for taking my question.
Here you go.
Today, are you there?
Please go ahead.
Okay, today we heard from EMA officials who seem to suggest that there may well be a link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and the rare complications that occurred. I'm wondering if you can give us an update on the WHO's own progress in sort of assessing the potential link and when you expect to make your own announcement public. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and let me give the floor to Dr. Rogerio Gaspar, Director for Regulation and Pre-Qualification.
Good afternoon. Let me just start by being clear and correct your affirmation or your mention to the European Medicines Agency. As you know, as we were here in the meeting already in this press briefing, there was a denial from the European Medicines Agency concerning the existence of the link. What happens is that there are a number of committees right now and the regulatory agencies and regulatory authorities looking at data, and new data is coming every day, and assessing those data. So there's no link for the moment between the vaccine and the thrombolytic events with thrombocytopenia. Of course, it's under evaluation, and we wait for some feedback from those committees in the coming days and in coming hours. Just to give a full assessment, probably this is good to give also an assessment with some numbers on it. The data are coming, as I said, every day. So we are looking at the pharmacovigilance networks globally, and WHO, of course, is relying heavily on the national pharmacovigilance systems, but also on the assessment committees from national regulatory authorities and also from regional regulatory authorities like the European Medicines Agency. The two EULs that were issued by WHO on AstraZeneca-based technologies, so one from the manufacturer SK Bio in the Republic of Korea, and an authorization given, an emergency use authorization given by the Republic of Korea Regulatory Authority, MFDS, and the second one from SII in India, with the correspondent authorization also from the Indian national regulatory authorities. Both of them are based on the core clinical data that was submitted by AstraZeneca to the European Medicines Agency. So the regulatory alignment currently is that we'll rely first on the assessment done by the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee by the European Medicines Agency, which started today at 11 o'clock and is supposed to continue tomorrow and probably the day after or not. That will depend on the committee. And we are following that meeting. We have observers on the meeting, and we are looking at the data jointly. And at the same time, as you know, the Medicines Health Products Regulatory Authority from the United Kingdom, MHRA, is also looking at the same set of data. So what we can say is that the appraisal that we have for the moment, and this is under consideration by the experts, is that the benefit-risk assessment for the vaccine is still largely positive. We continue to see a number of events that are rare events linking thrombocytopenia to thrombolytic events. And those rare events are now being categorized in terms of the diagnostics, in terms of the population, in terms of the distribution within the population. And the expert committees will come to decisions in coming hours and coming days about what will be the regulatory status for the vaccine. For the time being, there's no evidence that the benefit risk assessment for the vaccine needs to be changed. And we know from the data coming from countries like the UK and others that the benefits are really important in terms of reduction of the mortality of populations that are being vaccinated. So one important issue to say also, because on the media and also on the regulatory committees, we tend to stress too much the risk when we are discussing these issues, and we have to do that. We have also at the same time to balance this with the benefit coming from the vaccine, and I think it's important to reiterate this once again. Another issue which is also important, and that's why WHO is at the same time having a number of sessions, information sessions, groups of experts. Even this morning we had meetings with several regulatory agencies. During the midday break we had a global meeting with experts from different committees for information sharing and disseminating the totality of the information that is available. And in parallel with the current meetings at the European Medicines Agency and the Medicines Health Product Research Authority at the UK, we will convene tomorrow also our Global Advisory Committee on Vaccine Safety that together with other experts will look at those data. So we expect that probably by the end of today or the day after, so Wednesday or Thursday, we might have a fresh conclusive assessment from our experts. But as I've said already, at the present moment and under the assessment that we have from the data submitted up to yesterday, we are confident that the benefits risk assessment for the vaccine is largely still positive. Thank you.
And let me ask Dr. Simao for...
Very quickly, just to complement, because it's very important that everyone is aware that, just reinforcing what Dr. Rogério said, that we're collecting data from all regions, right? The data we have so far is some data observed in the European region. We are working, because millions and millions of AstraZeneca doses have been distributed and used in Latin America and in Africa, in India, in other countries in Asia. So we are very proactively collecting data from different national regulatory authorities. And we are also, let me say that we are also in touch with AstraZeneca, because AstraZeneca also has an obligation to report to monitoring the safety data and also to report to not only to the regulatory authorities, but also to WHO.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to Carmen Pound, Political. Carmen, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor, and hi, everybody. There have been quite a few reports over the last few days about a number of countries, specifically in Africa, that have received doses through COVAX, in some cases more than a month ago, and either have not deployed them at all, or, the rollout is super slow due to different issues, ranging from hesitancy to, logistical issues. So I wanted to see if there's any plan to sort of like ramp up support for deliveries, and if you're looking at what are the specific issues that are impeding the rollout or faster rollout in those countries, because I've seen that there are even concerns that some of the doses might expire before certain countries are able to, inoculate them. Thank you.
Let me ask Dr. Bruce Aylward.
Carmen, thanks so much for the question. It's so important, right? Our goal in rolling out vaccines is to ensure everywhere in the world no doses or vials lay idle and they're put to work as rapidly as possible. So recognizing the challenge it might pose to roll out these vaccines, because you're targeting different age groups, different populations than we normally do in many countries that are used to childhood vaccination programs. As a result, there was a huge amount of work that's was initiated last fall, actually, in especially low middle-income countries, to try and help first with an assessment across all the different parameters that would need to be optimized to roll out these vaccines, then the development of a what we call a national vaccines deployment plan across all of these countries, and then a tracking at the international level of by region and by country where countries were in terms of preparing preparedness. So the most important part of this was a huge amount of work that was done in advance, and credit really goes to a group of agencies across the WHO, UNICEF, the World Bank, and others that work together in a concerted effort across countries. So even, of course, the best laid plans are going to have challenges. We've seen that in every country in the world that's introduced these vaccines, whether high-income, middle, low-income countries. Everyone has struggled in rolling out these vaccines. Part of it is logistical, part of it is related to some of the challenges I just spoke of. So in every single country, WHO, UNICEF, but not only, also with a broad range of partners, are working with ministries and with communities to try and optimize the rollouts, rapidly identify what are the bottlenecks. And like you said, even in the question you asked, Cameron, it's a range of issues. Sometimes it's logistical, sometimes it might be hesitancy. We know that one country suspended the use of one vaccine or didn't want to until some of its concerns were reconciled. So it's been a whole range of issues, and it really is exactly what you said, a tailored approach in each country to try and help get past any bottlenecks to use so that as rapidly as possible these products can be protecting healthcare workers, protecting in particular the older populations and those at highest risk of the most severe disease.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aylward. With this, we come to the next. That's Gabriela Sotomayor from Notimex, Mexico.
Hola, Christian. Thank you for taking my question. It's on behalf of Proceso. 3,400 health workers have died in Mexico. So my question is about the vaccination of health workers. It is clear that the priority is those who are in the first line of fire treating patients with COVID. But what happens with the rest of the health personnel? When should they be vaccinated? In Mexico, for example, 65% of health personnel is under 50 years old, and 50% are under 40. So they would be at the end of the line of regular vaccination. So there are around 1 million health workers in this situation. So my question is, what is your recommendation? Because many of them are the first contact of patients with COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll give to Dr. Aylward again, please.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Gabrielle, for the question. So clearly, as you've seen and as we've been discussing now for some weeks, certain populations are at highest risk of being exposed to this disease, and then certain populations at highest risk of severe disease and death. And of course, healthcare workers at the front line are one of the populations that are at highest risk, of course, of being exposed and often having high exposures and repeated exposures to the disease. And that's the reason that the allocation framework that's been put together prioritizes the healthcare workers. And that's healthcare workers irrespective of age. It's actually any healthcare workers that are going to be coming into providing frontline services and at risk. Now, in every country, there's sometimes making adjustments in terms of their goals and whether or not the first goal is going to be to reduce the risk in the oldest population and then healthcare workers, or vice versa, or by age across both. So there is some, let's say, adaptation or adjustment by country, and it's often based on the strength of the healthcare system. It's sometimes based on the clinical outcomes that they're seeing in populations with severe disease in their countries. But in terms of rolling out the healthcare workers, and generally, this has been irrespective of the age. But again, as always, Gabrielle, and you highlighted, part of the challenge here is just finding the balance with the amount of vaccine that you have available. We're in an extremely, as everyone knows, supply-constrained situation. So each country has got to make a decision sometimes across these populations. How will I be using these vaccines? But again, healthcare workers, as the Director General said repeatedly, and also our guests today, have to be a top priority, as they are cannot often protect themselves from being exposed to the disease.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aylward. With this, we move to Jamil Shad from Estado Sao Paulo. Jamil, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
All good.
Yeah. Dr. Tedros, good afternoon. You had a meeting on Saturday with the new Minister of Health of Brazil. My question to you, what was your recommendation to him at this point of time? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Of course, we have discussed on the measures on the, starting from the situation, how the situation is serious in Brazil. He started actually by describing the situation, which is really dire, and also what he would like to do. And we agreed on the way forward, but to continue also to engage and committed from our side to help him in any way possible. So, of course, that was my first meeting with the minister since he was appointed. And we will have follow-up meetings, and especially to discuss on details of the actions that should be taken. There will be senior expert level engagements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros. We move to Jenny Leravello from DEVEX. Jenny, please unmute yourself.
Thank you for taking my question. WHO released a statement last week on ivermectin, but as you know, debates continue in a lot of countries. So I just want to know, are there plans to include ivermectin in the solidarity trials, or are you considering other drugs for the trials? And also, quickly, what the criteria are for including treatments in the solidarity trials? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Let's see, do we have... No, we were looking to have a colleague online who can answer this. Yep, we do not have a colleague available right now to answer this. We'll take your question offline and reply to you by email. With this, we move to the next, and that would be Jamie Keaton from AP. Jamie, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, everyone. This question, I think, is for Bruce. Bruce, today, all 4 countries that were represented at this briefing are expected to get AstraZeneca vaccines from SK Bio, according to Gavi. But many other countries are still expecting AstraZeneca vaccines from SII, the Serum Institute. Today, we spoke to the CEO, Adar Poonawalla, and he says that its exports for COVAX could now resume in June, even though Gavi had expressed hopes for a resumption in May, as the spike in case counts worsens in India. My question, how concerned are you that COVAX will be facing severe vaccine supply shortages in the coming months from SII, and what can be done about it? And how does COVAX survive this major setback that could even last beyond June? Thanks.
Dr. Aylward, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I think, first of all, let's not speculate on what's going to happen in terms of future deliveries from any of the companies that we're working with. Right now, every country we talk to, every company is trying to make sure that they prioritize COVAX and that we get the vaccines that we need. Obviously, if we have an interruption with any one of our suppliers for a short time, a month or so, we can find ways to try and manage as best we can with the countries. But if it prolongs, if it's longer than that, obviously would be a big challenge. We actually have had some good news over the last few days that some of the additional deliveries from SII have been opened up. You'll remember that there was a challenge, but there was some deliveries that have been opened up over the last few days, which would be important to all countries being able to start vaccination by the end of the 100-day period that the Director General has highlighted. But as you can say, actually, what I meant to make with that point, Jamie, is as you can see, there's this is a very fluid situation. We've had multiple reports of sometimes this vaccine supply is going to be cut back by this much or increased by that much. And in fact, because of the work by the companies and by the governments to increase supply, additional supplies have come through. You'll remember on the AstraZeneca side, where we'd had real challenges with supplies over the last few months, there's been a real pickup in deliveries with now over 45 countries supplied just from the AstraZeneca side of the supply. So it's a fluid situation. That's the reason that we try and have as robust a portfolio as possible. As you also know, we have got deals with J&J on the Novavax product, on other products. So part of trying to ensure that if there's a problem with one product, one supplier, is making sure that you have other options as well that will come online in the coming weeks and months, hopefully. So a range of things to try and address that, but clearly were there a complete interruption from any supplier, that would be a real problem. And that's the reason we're doing so much work to try and look at, as the Director General said, improving production capacities in the existing suppliers, bringing new suppliers on board, doing the emergency use listing assessments for yet additional products. So all of these steps are to try and mitigate any potential interruption in supply from any supplier.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elwood. Let me call upon Sophie Mokoena from South Africa BC, SABC. Sophie, please unmute yourself.
My question is around vaccine access, particularly to the developing South or poorer countries. The issue of passports, vaccine passports, is becoming more popular, and many people are looking at using that to ensure that they are able to manage the spread of COVID-19. What is the position of the WHO on this vaccine passport and also travel restrictions? And it's linked also to perhaps naming viruses on countries where they are being detected. I mean, the issue of 501YV2 is still being called a South African virus by even very senior experts in science like Dr. Faki of the United States of America. And is this not stigmatizing a country that has done so much to try and contribute?
Thank you very much, Sophie. Dr. van Kerkhoff, please.
Thanks, Sophie. I could start with the second part of your question. I think you know I've been on record of talking about the naming of these virus variants, and WHO for years has been talking about not including a location as part of a name of a virus or a disease or a pathogen or the disease caused by that pathogen. And SARS-CoV-2 variants are no different. We continue to see people name the variants country X variant or country Y variant, and we have been working hard actually on developing a nomenclature with a large group of scientists around the world, including the 3 groups that have developed different nomenclatures for the viruses. I have to admit, I foolishly thought this would be a very simple thing to do. I thought it could be done in a week or 2, and we're now into I think our second month of doing this. We hope to be able to announce the nomenclature very soon. Because we need to make sure that any of the names that are used do not further stigmatize a person or a last name or a location inadvertently. And so we're still working on that. But we do hope that countries do not say the South African variant, including scientists. Unfortunately, I hear that on many teleconferences that I'm on, and we spend a lot of time talking about these virus variants that are being detected around the world. The more you look, the more you will find. And with the increases in genomic sequencing that are happening worldwide, there are a lot of regional platforms that are being enhanced to make sure that we can find different mutations and different virus variants. There are a lot of research groups that are out there that are studying each of these mutations and the combinations of mutations, which are what these variants are, to determine if there are any changes in transmissibility and severity and any potential impact on our available and future diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. So it is really important that we do have names of these virus variants. Right now, what we're using is the B.1.1.7, the virus variant first identified in the United Kingdom, the B.1.351, the virus variant that was first identified in South Africa, and the P.1, which is the virus variant that was first detected in Japan but is circulating in Brazil. But there should be no stigma associated with these viruses being detected, and unfortunately, we still see that happening. Countries that are conducting surveillance, that are carrying out sequencing, that are sharing those sequences on publicly available platforms, that are working with WHO and scientists around the world should not be stigmatized for sharing this information. In fact, we need more of this to be happening worldwide, and we will continue to work with partners to ensure that that happens.
Dr. Ryan, please.
Just on your question regarding certification of vaccination, WHO does support certification of vaccination, be it paper or electronic, as a means of providing personal health information to people who are vaccinated and to give them a record of that vaccination, but also for monitoring and evaluation purposes and quality assurance purposes in the health system. So having proper certification and recording of vaccination is very important. That's a different consideration to what those certificates are used for outside the health space. And that would be health certification of vaccination being used to attend work, to attend school, to attend events, to travel nationally or internationally. They are not necessarily related to the health of the individual, but to other factors. And this is a complex issue. It has both considerations around how such certification could be utilised to reduce transmission, but also around knowledge around the impact of vaccination itself and the way in which vaccination may or may not prevent transmission. And there are ethical issues here regarding equity. We already have a huge issue with vaccine equity in the world. The imposition of requirements for certification of vaccination before travel could introduce another layer of such inequity. If you don't have access to vaccine in a country, then you effectively become isolated as a country as vaccine passports kick in. So there are many, many, many issues. Currently, WHO, or through the Emergency Committee of the International Health Regulations, have made temporary recommendations to the Director General that proof of vaccination should not be a requirement, be required for the purposes of international travel. That group will meet again, I believe, on the 15th of April, and I'm sure that recommendation will be under consideration. In the meantime, we are bringing together our Strategic and Technical Advisory Group on Infectious Hazards with the Strategic Advisory Group on Immunisation and the Ethics Advisory Group of WHO together to look at these issues. And currently we have an internal working group really pulling together both the scientific data, social data, the ethical data, so we can come and get the best possible external advice in order to advise our member states regarding the use of and potential use of vaccine passports, as you call them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the last question, we go to Robin Mia from AFP. Robin, please unmute yourself.
No, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Within the European Union, some countries like Spain and Germany have relatively low rates of new infections, whilst other countries like Poland and Estonia and Hungary have seen some of the highest rates in the world. So my question is, in big areas, like, say, Brazil, or in this case, the European Union, would it make sense to divert vaccines away from areas of low infection and concentrate on areas of high infection to tackle the fire where it's burning most strongly? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Romain. Dr. Simao, please.
Let me start, and then colleagues can complement. I think it's very important, Robin, to clarify that vaccines are not necessarily a good response to an acute problem, right? Because vaccines take time to reach immunity and everything else. So it's extremely important that when you have a lot of community transmission, like we're seeing in some of these countries, that what we call the public health measures are taken into account and they are strictly followed. And these are the mask, consistent use of mask, hand hygiene, ventilation, avoiding crowded crowds, and in some specific cases, even lockdowns, and as we are seeing in Europe. So we have discussed last year what would be the role in whether we should have a buffer for emergency response related to spikes in transmission. And the decision that we did collectively last year was not to do that at this stage, because, like I said, vaccines are not a good response for immediate situations. What you need in the case of high transmission in the community is to decrease the possibilities of transmission. That means that decreasing, to avoid that people get in touch with each other and avoid crowds and everything else. So, and also there is a very, let's say, it's from the epidemiology perspective, no one can predict where it's going to be rising next, right? We are seeing that even countries that have reached a higher vaccination already, we are seeing peaks in communities and peaks in cities and provinces. So it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen next, where it's the next surge will come. So I think the approach right now is that we're pushing for equitable access to vaccines. And that we are pushing, as was discussed already today, to ensure that people at high risk of infection, or people like we mentioned, was mentioned before, the healthcare workers, and also people at higher risk of dying, older people and people with comorbidities, associated diseases, that they are put first. And we think this should happen, that WHO's position that this should happen in all countries, not on specific countries only. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. We're coming to the close. Oh, no, we have an add-on from Dr. Van Kerkhove.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I do want to come in on this because I think we need to remind everybody that vaccination is one element of the response strategy. And as Mariangela has said, as you have heard us say repeatedly over and over again, we are accused often of being a broken record, and we will be happy to continue to be this broken record until this pandemic is over. But there are a number of elements, interventions that can be used that drive down transmission. Globally, we have passed the 6th week in a row where we have seen a consecutive increase in cases around the world. Last week, there were 4 million new cases reported to WHO, and that is likely an underestimate of the true infections that have been occurring globally. We are seeing this in all of our regions. There's a slight decline in Europe, but there are still significant increases in a number of countries like France, Turkey, Italy, Ukraine. The U.S. continues to have increased transmission, the Americas continues to have an increased transmission driven by Brazil, Canada, Argentina, Colombia, the U.S., the same thing in Southeast Asia, a number of countries. We can go on and on. All of this data is in our dashboard, but we continue to see increases in transmission. And we have to remind everyone that there are a number of interventions. This is the tried and true measures, these public health measures that drive transmission down. It's this all of government, all of society approach. It's about knowing where the virus is circulating, so having good strategic testing linked to public health action, ensuring that cases are isolated, that they receive appropriate care. It's contact tracing of contacts of known cases that are in supported quarantine so that they, if they are infected, do not have the possibility to transmit the virus onward. It's about getting into the clinical care pathway early so that individuals who are infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus are seen and are assessed so that they are treated appropriately and that they are cared for appropriately. It is making sure that we have engaged, informed, empowered communities so that they know what they need to do. We understand that the situation is evolving. The situation where you live changes. So following guidance and following the local recommendations is really important. There is very good information that is out there that tells you in the area where you live, in the area where you work, what is safe to do and what is not. At an individual level, it's about physical distancing. It's about wearing a mask. It's about practicing respiratory etiquette, making sure you have clean hands, making sure that you have good ventilation, you avoid crowded areas. All of this matters. This will not change until this pandemic is over. So we cannot rely all on vaccines and vaccinations. We have to continue to put in the individual level measures. We need communities that are supported. If there is a stay-at-home measure in place, we need governments to support individuals to be at home. All of this still matters. So we will continue to be this broken record and remind the world that there is a strategy out there about suppressing transmission. This guidance, this strategy was issued on the 4th of January last year, and it still is the maintained strategy of what we have now to drive transmission down, adding vaccines and vaccination into the mix so that we keep transmission low and we open up our societies. So we cannot forget that there are a number of measures that are in place that we have the power to use now.
Thank you so much for this, and thank you all for your participation, especially our special guests. We will be sending the audio files right after this, and we hope to include the speech of the President of Namibia. With this, let me hand over to Dr. Tedros.
Christian, can I just come in, because it's just an update on a previous question regarding ivermectin, and
of course,
just to confirm that ivermectin is not currently included in the Solidarity trial. But there are trials ongoing in other countries. The latest recommendations from WHO indicate that the evidence on the use of ivermectin is not conclusive, and further studies are recommended, particularly in large-scale randomized controlled trials. With regard to the process within the Solidarity trial, an independent panel of experts uses a set of defined criteria to pre-select potential drugs into the trial. A prioritization working group then reviews the panel of experts' recommendations, and then finally what gets through that group goes to the trial steering committee, who then endorse those recommendations and introduce those drugs into the trial. So there are 3 different independent panels of experts who filter all the potential drugs. There's a series of criteria that are used around pharmacokinetics, plausible evidence on the mechanism of action, animal data, safety data, availability of the drug, and currently a number of drugs are under consideration for the trial, including 3 new drugs, and we've been really trying to get to this, is moving not away from old drugs, because old drugs as we've seen, like dexamethasone, have proved life-saving, but really beginning to test the newer molecules and drugs that are coming online. So we look forward to the next selection of drugs for the Solidarity trial.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan. This was in clarification for a question from Divex. Now with this, let me hand over to the Director General for closing remarks and for thanking the guests.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I would like to invite Her Excellency Prime Minister Motley to say a few words for closing this session. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros. I was very engaged during the course of questioning. This is very much still a fluid event for all of us in the world, but it is one that really has the capacity to upend developing countries, and we need to ensure that as we fight the pandemic, we also put down the tools to avert a debt crisis, which is potentially on us if we do not get it right. As I speak to you, the chairman of the Caribbean community has regrettably tested positive, Prime Minister Keith Rowley. And I know that you have been in contact with him recently, and I would therefore want to express our deepest concerns for his urgent and quick recovery. But this just drives home the point that until we deal with this with all people, we haven't dealt with it. And I trust and pray that these continued works and World Health Day tomorrow will remind us of the urgency for coordinated action and for the urgency of acting together. We look forward to the continued support of WHO and PAHO, particularly for those countries who have limitations in terms of the depth of technical resources. And it is for that we continue to pray that we have access, because that makes all of the difference to people living. We heard very clearly that global transmission has increased over the last 6 weeks, and to that extent, we continue to remind persons that there is no mechanism at the individual level that is too much to protect your lives. From the personal protocols right back through to what we will do at the global level and at the national level to give people access to vaccines ahead of time, ahead of the battle with the variants. So thank you very much, Dr. Tedros, and I look forward to continuing to work with the World Health Organization and PAHO as we come on top and win this battle against COVID-19 that has done so much to decimate so many. The tail of it, regrettably, is long, and we work towards ensuring that we can reduce the consequences of that tail on our people as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I fully agree with what you said, and also I join you in expressing my, wishes for fast recovery to His Excellency Prime Minister Rowley. I would also like to thank all heads of states who have joined today, His Excellency President Gain Gob, His Excellency President Alvarado, and also His Excellency President Aliyev. Thank you so much once more, and thank you so much for your leadership. Finally, tomorrow we will publish an additional short list of films for the Health for All Film Festival. This fourth shortlist is dedicated to health equity. I invite the public to post questions in the comment section of the shortlisted videos, which are available on YouTube and through the WHO website. Some of your questions will be asked to the jurors and winners during the award ceremonies, to be streamed on WHO's YouTube channel on 13th May 2021. Thank you to all journalists also, finally, for joining, and see you in our upcoming presser. Thank you so much.